every single food you have ever eaten, Samone, at some point, had to test, and some of them died doing it. Sit with that for a moment. The world is full of plants that look delicious and will kill you, berries that are sweet and lethal, roots that are nourishing food if you prepare them one way, and deadly poison if you don't. Your ancestors had no labels, no science, no way to know which was which, except one. They had to find out. And the knowledge of what was safe to eat, the knowledge that kept your entire bloodline alive long enough to reach you, was written in the deaths of the people who guessed wrong. Stay with me, because this is the story of how humanity mapped the difference between a meal and a grave, and it is far more brilliant and far more brutal than you think. Let's start with a problem you've never had to think about because it has been solved for you your whole life. You have never once wondered whether your food would kill you. You've never picked up something to eat and thought, asterisk, is this the one that ends me? Asterisk, but that question hung over every single meal in the ancient world, and it is rooted in something strange about what kind of animal we are. Most animals don't have this problem because most animals are specialists. A koala eats one kind of leaf. Its body is built for that leaf. Its instincts pointed at that leaf, and it never has to wonder. It is born knowing exactly what to eat, and it eats that and nothing else for its whole life. But humans went a completely different direction. We became the ultimate generalists. We can eat meat, plants, roots, seeds, fruits, fungi, shellfish, eggs, food from nearly every environment on the face of the planet. And that flexibility is one of the greatest survival advantages any creature has ever had. It is a huge part of how we spread into every corner of the world, because almost anywhere we went, there was asterisk something asterisk we could eat. But that superpower came with a curse, and it is the whole reason this question matters. Because if you can eat almost anything, then you can also be poisoned by almost anything. Because it only knows one thing. But a human, standing in front of 100 unfamiliar plants, faces 100 gambles. And here is the cruelest part: we are not born knowing which is which. A newborn human arrives knowing almost nothing about what is safe. That instinct, that built-in menu other animals are born with, we largely traded it away for flexibility. Which means every human and every group of humans and every generation had to somehow learn the difference between food and poison from scratch or from each other and get it right or die. That is the problem our ancestors woke up to. Not, what do I want to eat, but what can I eat without dying, in a world designed to trick them. And this problem didn't stay the same. It got harder every time humans moved. Because our species didn't stay in one place. We spread constantly into new lands, new climates, new worlds full of plants no human eye had ever seen. And every time a group pushed into unfamiliar territory, their hard-won map of safe foods became partly useless. The plants they'd known their whole lives weren't there. In their place stood 100 new strangers, some of them food, some of them death, and no way to tell which by looking. So the danger reset itself with every migration. A group crossing into a new valley, a new coastline, a new continent, was a group that had to rebuild its knowledge of what was safe, often from scratch, in a landscape actively trying to poison them. This is one of the hidden costs of being the animal that conquered the whole planet. Every new frontier came with a fresh, deadly quiz about what was on the menu, and the price of a wrong answer was a body in the dirt. And yet, again and again, humans walked into those new worlds and figured it out. How they did that without dying out every time they moved is the heart of this story. So how do you even begin to solve a problem like that? How do you take the very first bite of something new, when that bite might be your last? And the answer is the first of humanity's tools against poison: careful, cautious, deliberate testing. Because here is what people get wrong. They imagine our ancestors just shoving unknown berries into their mouths and hoping. That is not it at all. That is how you die. The humans who survived were the ones who approached a new food the way a bomb disposal expert approaches a device. Slowly, and with enormous care. There is real evidence that peoples all over the world, when faced with an unfamiliar plant, used a patient, step-by-step process. First, you might just handle it and rub a little on the skin, and wait, watching for a bad reaction. Then perhaps touch a tiny amount to the lips, and wait again. Then, the smallest possible taste held in the mouth, not swallowed, and wait and watch for the bitterness or the burning that so often screams asterisk danger. Asterisk, and only if every step passed, a tiny amount eaten, followed by a long, careful wait to see what the body did. Think about the discipline in that. Every instinct in a starving body screams to just eat. But the ones who survived overrode that and tested slowly because they understood a hard truth. A small dose of a poison might make you sick, but a large dose kills you. By approaching the unknown in the tiniest possible amounts, they gave themselves a chance to discover a poison while it could still only hurt them, not kill them. It was a way of asking the world, is this safe? In the quietest possible whisper, so that if the answer was no, it wouldn't be the last thing they ever heard. This careful testing turned the deadly gamble of a new food into something a little more survivable. It didn't make it safe, but it tilted the odds toward life. Picture it happening, because the patience of it is almost unbearable. A group has moved into new country, and there is an unfamiliar plant everywhere. Maybe a root, maybe a fruit. Something that could be food if only they knew. They're hungry. It is right there. But the experienced ones don't let anyone eat it. Instead, someone takes a small piece and simply crushes it against the inside of their wrist. And then everyone waits hours, maybe watching that patch of skin for redness, for burning, for any sign the plant is fighting back. If nothing happens, they go to the next step, a tiny touch to the lips. And the wait again, feeling for tingling or numbness. Then the smallest taste on the tongue, held there, not swallowed, because a bitter, burning, or soapy taste is the plant screaming *poison*. And that scream is enough to make them spit it out and abandon it entirely. And only if it passes every stage does one person, usually just one, so the group doesn't lose everyone at once if they're wrong, eat a small amount and then wait through a long and anxious night to see what the morning brings. Days might pass before that plant is trusted enough to feed the children. Days for a single new food. That is not the behavior of a reckless animal. That is a careful, disciplined, almost scientific mind, treating its own body as the last line of a very cautious experiment. And if this is already changing how you picture these people, if the reckless caveman shoving berries in his mouth is being replaced by something far more careful and intelligent, then do me one favor, tap that subscribe button right now. This channel is for people who want the real story of where we came from, not the cartoon version. The people who understand that our ancestors survived with caution and intelligence, not luck. You belong here. Now stay with me, because testing food on your own body, even carefully, is incredibly dangerous. And our ancestors were far too clever to rely only on that, because they had another way to learn what was safe. One that let something else take the risk for them. They were extraordinary observers of the world around them, and they learned to read the other living things as a source of information about what was safe. Watch the animals. If the birds gorge on a certain berry, and the animals eat a certain plant and thrive, that is a clue, a hint that this food might be safe, worth testing carefully. It is not a guarantee, because some things an animal can eat will still hurt a human, and our ancestors knew that too. But it was a starting point, a way to narrow down the deadly field of unknowns. They watched which plants the animals avoided completely and treated those with suspicion. They became detectives of the natural world, gathering evidence about what was food and what was death from every creature around them. And they were clever about how they read the animals, because they understood the clues weren't perfect. They knew that just because a bird could eat a berry didn't mean a human could. A small animal can sometimes handle a dose that would drop a person, and some things are safe for one creature and lethal for another. So they didn't follow the animals blindly. They used them as one clue among many, a way to sort the overwhelming field of unknown plants into maybe worth testing and treat with suspicion. They noticed subtler things, too, where the healthy animals grazed and where they wouldn't go, which fruits vanished the instant they ripened, and which ones rotted on the branch untouched. An untouched plant in a world full of hungry mouths was itself a warning. If nothing else will eat this, maybe nothing else can. Every one of these observations was a thread of evidence, and our ancestors wove them together into a picture of the living world far more detailed and accurate than we usually give them credit for. They were reading the landscape like a text, and the subject of that text was survival. And they watched each other too, and this is where it turns dark. Because when someone in the group ate something and fell sick, that was a lesson, paid for in someone's suffering, that the whole group could learn from. The plant that made a person violently ill was remembered. The food that came before a death was marked forever as the enemy. Every poisoning, every sickness, every tragedy became a piece of hard data, written into the group's memory. Not that. Never that, in this way. The deaths were not wasted. As brutal as it is to say, each person who guessed wrong and suffered for it taught everyone else something that might save their lives. The knowledge of poison was built, quite literally, out of the misfortune of the people who found it first. And there is something quietly heroic in that, when you look at it the right way. Every safe food we take for granted today sits on top of an invisible cost, a person, somewhere back in the deep past, who ate it first and paid for the lesson so that everyone after them wouldn't have to. They didn't choose to be the test, but their suffering became a gift to every generation that followed, a warning or a green light written permanently into the memory of their people. We are, all of us, eating safely today because of ancestors whose names we'll never know, who found the edges of what could kill us the only way anyone could, by finding them first. But even careful testing and sharp observation run into a wall, because some of the most important foods in human history are ones you cannot make safe by any of that. And this is the deepest mystery in the whole story. Because there are plants that fed entire civilizations, that kept whole peoples alive, that are, in their raw natural state, genuinely poisonous, dangerously so. Eat them straight from the ground, and they'll make you gravely ill, or worse. And yet our ancestors ate them, safely, as staple foods, because they had learned to transform them through elaborate, multi-step processes: soaking, leaching, grinding, fermenting, cooking, rinsing, sometimes over hours or even days, in a precise sequence. Steps that break down or wash out the poison and leave behind something nourishing and safe. These processing techniques are real, and they exist all over the world, wherever people relied on a food that was dangerous in its raw form. And here is the mystery that should genuinely stop you cold. How did anyone ever figure that out? Think about what it would take to discover that a deadly plant becomes safe only after a long, complicated, multi-stage process, where each step is invisible, where getting the order or the timing wrong still leaves you poisoned. Seems almost impossible to stumble onto by chance. Nobody could just guess the whole recipe. So how did they learn it? The answer reveals something profound about the human mind, and it is not magic. It is the slow, patient power of incremental discovery, spread across many people and long spans of time. It likely began with a small observation that a food was a little less bitter, a little less sickening, after it sat in water or after it was cooked. Someone noticed that, and built on it. Maybe soaking it longer helped more. Each small improvement, discovered by someone, was remembered and passed on, and the next generation started from there and added their own small step. No single genius invented the whole process. It was assembled, piece by piece, over generations, a collaboration between people who never met, each adding one link to a chain that eventually turned poison into bread. Trace how it might actually have grown across lifetimes. Generation 1 is desperate in a hard season, and someone tries the dangerous plant and gets sick, but notices that the ones who happened to soak it in the river first suffered a little less. That is the seed. Generation 2 remembers. Soak it first, does it as a rule, survives a bit better, and someone notices that crushing it before soaking helps even more, because more of the bad thing washes away. Generation 3 inherits, crush it, then soak it, and adds cooking at the end, and now the food is nearly safe. Generation 4, born into a world where this multi-step method, simply is how you prepare that plant, refines the timing until the process is reliable enough to feed everyone. And by Generation 10, children are taught the full elaborate recipe as an unquestioned fact of life, with no idea that each step was paid for in someone's sickness centuries before, that the whole method is a monument, built one painful discovery at a time. Nobody alive remembers inventing it because nobody did. It wasn't discovered. It was accumulated. What looks like an impossible recipe, is really the fossil of thousands of years of human trial, observation, and accumulated cleverness, layered one discovery on top of another until the finished method emerged. It is one of the greatest examples of something humans do that almost nothing else on Earth can. We don't just learn, we stack our learning generation on generation until we achieve things no single lifetime could. Which brings us to the final piece, and the most important one of all, because none of this, not the careful testing, not the years of observation, not the elaborate recipes built over generations, none of it means anything if it can't be remembered and passed on. And that is the true secret of how humans knew what was safe to eat. Because here is the thing, no single person could ever learn it all in one lifetime. There are far too many plants, too many dangers, too many precise techniques. If every human had to figure out the safe foods from scratch, our species would never have survived. We'd die relearning the same deadly lessons over and over forever. What saved us was that we didn't have to. We had something almost no other animal has, a way to store the knowledge outside of any one person, in the shared memory of the group, and to hand it down the generations, whole and intact. The hard-won map of food and poison lived in the culture itself, in the elders who carried decades of it in their heads, in the mothers teaching their children which plant to pick and which to fear, in the stories and the warnings and the rules passed from the old to the young. And they encoded it in clever, sticky ways, so it couldn't be lost. Sometimes it was a simple, direct lesson. Asterisk, this one is good. That one will kill you. Here is how you know the difference. Asterisk, sometimes it was wrapped in a story, a memorable tale about someone who ate the wrong thing, so vivid that no child who heard it would ever forget. Sometimes it hardened into a taboo or a ritual, a rule you followed without question, even if you didn't personally know the reason, because your people had always followed it. And that rule might be the crystallized wisdom of an ancestor who died discovering exactly why it existed. And this is worth pausing on, because a taboo, a rule that says, we never eat this, with no explanation required, is a brilliant piece of survival technology. It doesn't depend on every person understanding the danger. A child doesn't need to know the chemistry of a poison, or witness the death it caused, to be protected by the rule. We do not eat that. The knowledge is preserved even after the reason for it is forgotten, carried safely across generations, as a custom everyone simply obeys. The story does the same work, another way. A vivid, frightening, unforgettable tale about the person who ate the wrong thing sticks in a young mind far better than any dry warning, and travels intact from grandparent to grandchild for centuries. These weren't just quaint traditions. They were data storage, humanity's way of writing life-saving information into culture itself. So the map of food and poison could survive the death of every single person who helped draw it. Think about the old woman who slaps a poisonous berry out of a child's hand. She may never have seen anyone die from it, but the knowledge reached her anyway, across the generations, carried on the voices of everyone who came before, and now she passes it to the child, who will one day pass it on again. That unbroken chain of memory, stretching back across countless lifetimes, is the real answer to our question. It is a library with no books, holding the most important survival knowledge a human could possess, rewritten into living minds and handed forward, again and again, without a single break. So let's finally answer it. How did ancient humans know what was safe to eat? Not by instinct. We were born knowing almost nothing, not by luck. Luck runs out, and a species cannot survive on it. They knew because they built the knowledge the hard way over immense spans of time. They tested the unknown with painstaking care. They watched the animals and each other for clues and learned from every sickness and every loss. They cracked the impossible poisons with techniques assembled piece by piece across generations. And above all, they remembered. They stored the whole hard-won map in their culture and their stories and their elders, and handed it down, flawlessly enough, across thousands of years, so that no generation had to learn it all again from the deaths of the last. And now, let's kill the myth. The one that imagines this knowledge as simple instinct, or the cartoon caveman munching whatever he found. The truth is that knowing what to eat was one of the most sophisticated things our ancestors ever did. It was humanity's first great science, long before microscopes or laboratories, a real working system of careful observation, cautious experiment, evidence gathered from the world, and knowledge accumulated and tested and passed down across generations. That is science. In its deepest form, our ancestors were running it, at the dinner table, for hundreds of thousands of years with their own lives as the stakes. And every one of them who got it right and taught it forward is a reason you're alive. So the next time you eat something, anything, without a flicker of fear that it might kill you, stop for just a second and feel what that safety really is. It is not obvious. It was not free. Every food on your plate is safe because somewhere back down the long chain of your ancestors, people figured out that it was, some of them at the cost of their lives, and made sure the knowledge was never lost. You eat without fear because they ate with courage. That freedom from the daily terror of your own food is one of the oldest gifts your ancestors ever gave you, and you never even knew you were carrying it. But this incredible ability to gather knowledge, remember it, and pass it down across generations didn't just tell our ancestors what to eat. It became the foundation of everything we would ever build. Because once humans could store knowledge outside of a single mind and hand it forward through time, they had invented something more powerful than any tool. They had invented a way to make each generation start where the last one left off. So how did that single ability, the passing down of knowledge, go on to build the entire human world? That is the story we open next.